Now, an in-depth look at the news and information shaping our community. This is Moose Talks with your host, Doug Craig, on Moose FM.
Welcome to another episode of the show. A little later on, we're going to meet and talk to Haley Bassett, the Executive Director of the Peace Liard Regional Arts Council. She just took over the job in the fall, and there's lots going on with them all the time, including they've got this new thing called the Open Sky Artist in Residence Program that they're accepting applications for. So we'll find out more about Haley and, of course, that residence program, which you can apply for today. So more on that a little later on. But first, there was a major discovery, once again, another major discovery, I should say, made near Tumbler Ridge recently, featuring ancient crocodile swim trace evidence. I hope I've got that right. These crocs sound like they're enormous. They could be the biggest discovered in the Peace for sure, in Canada, perhaps even in the world. And so to talk a bit about it, we're joined now by someone who's been working around Tumbler Ridge and then at the Tumbler Ridge Museum at the Geopark and helped discover these swim tracks, as I understand it, Dr. Charles Helm. Dr. Helm, thank you very much for being here and welcome to Moose Talks.
Hello, it's great to be here.
All right, well, why don't we start with this incredible discovery that you helped to make recently. Tell me a bit about what it is exactly you found, or you and the people involved found.
Yeah, it is a team effort, but the main site, we've got a cliff face which is continually carving rocks and rock slabs and rock blocks due to erosion, freeze thaw and so on. And so every year we go and check for new evidence, what's come down there. We know that there have been dinosaur tracks there, so we're always looking for more of these. And then I believe it was in 2018, we just realized this is new stuff. There's different stuff here. It looks different. It's not the regular dinosaur tracks. And it took us a little while to put things together and piece it together and realize, wow, this is actually evidence of swimming crocodiles. We kind of knew what to look for because we've had another site which we published on last year, also of crocodile swim traces, but they were much smaller crocodiles, about 1 to 2 meters long, but we kind of had our eye in, and so we knew what we were looking for, and all of a sudden we realized, wow, it's not just that we've got swim traces, it's that these are enormous. And what we can do, we can actually use the distance between the claw impressions. So these are crocodiles, as they're swimming, they're scraping the muddy bottom of the lake that they're in. They're just scraping the bottom. They're not walking, they're scraping with their claws. Mm-hmm. And they leave these long traces, long parallel traces, depending on how many toes and claws register. But we can use the distance between the claws to estimate the length of the crocodile. It's not precise, it's within a meter or so, but it's pretty close. And you know, the biggest distance we found at one site was 19.5 centimeters between the claws, and that is just enormous. You can imagine that's almost 8 inches long, almost a foot long. And we estimate the crocodile that made that is certainly 8 to 10 meters, maybe as much as 12 meters long.
Wow!
We also found one track, an actual crocodile track, which turned out to be made by a crocodile that was just under 9 meters long. So, the swim traces and the track evidence came together quite nicely. And so the thing is that elsewhere in the world, there's been evidence 4 or 5 times since the Triassic 250 million years ago of crocodiles taking on these giant forms. And one of these is in South America, one in Africa, one in Asia, and we have one in North America as well called Deinosuchus, which, but the thing is, this Deinosuchus only appears in the fossil record at 82 million years ago, and our rocks here are 95 to 97 million years ago. And all the other evidence we have in the world of giant crocodiles is through body fossils, bones, the skull, teeth, whatever. And this is the first time ever in the world that we've got good evidence of crocodile tracks and traces of that size. And it pushes back this notion of giant crocodiles in the Peace region by 13, 15, even more million years, which is really special. And it was just a privilege for me to be part of I grew up in South Africa, being very familiar with crocodiles, having a great respect for them. And but the largest crocodiles today are 4, 5, maybe 6 meters long. So the length here is double the biggest crocodiles we've got today. And it was just an amazing experience. Very relieved, though, that there are no crocodiles that are going to come out and attack me when just working with the fossils. Because a 12-meter croc just sounds incredibly intimidating.
Wow. Okay. Well, I have several follow-up questions for you. First of all, you mentioned the tracks. You sort of measured the distance. Is it kind of between the forearms or the back legs like this, or is it between like the front and a back leg that you're measuring the distance and then extrapolating?
No, we're measuring the distance between the digits. So,
I see now.
Yeah,
so like this.
Between the paws, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
wow.
the distance we're measuring, and that is 19.5 centimeters, because they scrape the bottom and you get these parallel grooves, and you measure the distance between the grooves, which is the distance between the claws. So it's not between the front and the back or anything like that. It's actually, and the amazing thing is, within those grooves we get striations, little smaller grooves, and this is why they're actually called elite traces. They're some of the finest traces that anyone has ever found of this kind, because it represents the little scales on the bottom of the crocodile foot and toe. We can actually even see how those little tiny scales left a pattern which dragged there. So it's incredible preservation.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. I want to ask this too. You mentioned that this was from, you figured 90. I may get this number wrong. 95 million years ago on the fossil record, and before that, the earliest you'd kind of found was 80 million years ago. So is this something you think it's something that's already maybe existed, or is this like a precursor to what was already that you already know about? Is this like an unnamed new perhaps species or type of crocodile that you've never seen before?
Right. Yeah, so the 82 million year North American giant crocodile called Deinosuchus, that has never been recorded from Canada. It's been recorded from the USA and from Mexico. And now we have the track evidence. So we don't really know. I mean, it's probably likely that this was a precursor of Deinosuchus. I mean, it could, I suppose, be a totally different species of giant crocodile. All we know is that it's a giant crocodile that made these things. Deinosuchus is a giant alligator, which is slightly different from a crocodile, but close enough. So we can't say for sure. We don't want to speculate more than we need to. All we know, this is a giant crocodilian, and it's 15 million years before there's any evidence in the body fossil record of this kind of thing in North America. And this is certainly the first evidence from Canada. The other thing is we have actually 4 or 5 sites, and the closest one to Tumbler Ridge is between Tumbler Ridge and Chetwynd, but some of the other sites are between Fort St. John and Dawson Creek, between Chetwynd and Dawson Creek, and so on. So it's not we brought them into the Tumbler Ridge Museum, these traces, and that's where they are housed, and that's where we'll exhibit them. But this is really something for the entire Peace region to celebrate, because some of these the sites are dotted all through the Peace region.
Mm-hmm. I also wanted to ask this. You mentioned the cliff face, kind of where you checked, you keep checking, and you happen to find these traces there. Just out of curiosity, is this like an easily accessible cliff face, or do you have to climb down to have a look at it? Like, how labor intensive is it to find these in the first place and keep checking it every year, as you say?
It's actually a very accessible site, the main site, but one's got to be careful there, because just as these rocks keep on carving down and tumbling down from the cliff, you don't want that to happen when you're there. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to be pretty careful, and we always wear hard hats, etc., because you can almost think of it as an industrial site where you've got to take proper precautions. But no, it's very accessible, and that is why we're always concerned about the possibility of vandalism, etc. But we actually managed to bring the main trace-bearing rocks, these massive blocks, in the fall of 2020, we actually managed to bring them into the museum thanks to a very kind donation from the Prairie Crane, used their crane equipment to bring these 4 massive blocks in. And that's why we now have them in the museum, and we hopefully will be putting them on exhibit sometime soon.
Very cool. You also touched on this too. I had to ask, something like this, was it a complete surprise that it was there, or did you have an inkling that you might find something like this and maybe the scale of it was just really surprising? Or was there sort of hints in the previous sort of things that you'd found in the area, in the Peace region, whatever it has to be, that might say, we might find something like this one day, depending on, as you say, when the rocks come down in certain sites?
Right. So, people think now of Tumbler Ridge and the Peace region as this dinosaur heaven, where we find all these dinosaur tracks. But we've been aware for a while that we get crocodiles as well, and crocodile tracks, and swim traces. So the fact that there are crocodiles here, that was not a surprise. We're finding more croc tracks and traces every year, really. But it's the size. We were not expecting that size. That was completely unexpected. And in fact, the first time you find one of these, you actually almost don't want to believe it. You think, no, surely it's something else. Surely it can't be. It can't be. And then over time, you find another site and then another one and another one. Oh, my goodness. We do have giant crocs here. Now it's our obligation to try and report this, scientifically and sensibly, and get the media releases out, because this is a global first for the Peace region, and it's important to get the word out there. It's something, as I see it, that every resident of the Peace region can really be proud of, to say nothing of BC and Canada. I mean, this is a global first.
Wonderful. Well, we've only got about a minute left, so I want to ask this one before we go. When you find something like this, first of all, it's fascinating. When you are able to put it on display, kids, adults alike can come see this and say, oh, that's very cool. And it's just sort of a neat, fascinating thing to find. What do you think the larger sort of significance of this is? What does it tell us, if anything, even, about the geology of the area, or of the kind of the Peace region, or even, if at all possible, about ourselves? Do you think there's something larger, or is it just super fascinating to find these things?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. These things all, we've got to know where we came from to know where we're heading. And it tells us about climate. And, this was close to the Arctic Circle at that time. That's where we sat at that time. So there are all sorts of implications. And this was a delta, incredibly flat, as flat as you can imagine, and about 100 kilometers inland from the sea. There are all sorts of things we can tell. And there were ankylosaurs and other ornithopods and other dinosaurs walking in the same area. And everyone thinks dinosaurs are cool, crocs are really cool. And these crocs must have been the top predators, the apex predators of their day. So when I think now of those days, I think of dinosaurs, but I think of crocs.
Fascinating. Well, Dr. Helm, I'm really grateful you took a few minutes to chat with us about this. It's been a real delight for me, and I hope we hear more about this and that you're able to find even more evidence, and maybe we'll have a name for this this giant crocodile the next time you come on. Thank you so much, Dr. Helm.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
You're very welcome. That's Dr. Charles Helm with the Tumbler Ridge Museum. Welcome back to the program. Well, the Peace Liard Regional Arts Council is one of many arts councils in our region. They work with the Fort St. John Arts Council, for example, and others, the one in Dawson Creek and whatnot, and they do a lot of cool programs. So to talk about that and the new job that is ahead of her, we're joined now by the Executive Director, Haley Bassett from the Peace Liard Regional Arts Council. Haley, thank you so much for being on Moose Talks.
Thanks for having me.
We got a bit of a delay, but we'll work through it there. So I thought we'd talk a bit about you, first of all, and kind of where you came from. How did you come to be the Executive Director of the Arts Council? What's kind of your experience?
Well, I was born and raised here, and I finished my art degree in Vancouver and came back in 2020. I've been working in community arts with the Dawson Creek Art Gallery since 2018. I've also been on the board of the Regional Arts Council since 2018. So I've kind of been in this circle for a while.
So it's sort of a natural evolution that when Donna Kane was moving on, this could be the next sort of thing for you then. And you're like, yeah, I'll do it.
For sure. I definitely had my eye on this position.
Well, I mean, that brings me to my next question. What about this job appealed to you specifically, as you said, given kind of the experience you had? What did you see that you could do in this job that was maybe different than what you kind of already were doing previously?
Well, it's funny. My previous work with the Dawson Creek Art Gallery is very similar to what I'm doing now. I've kind of noticed there are specific barriers to the arts in the Peace region that you might not find elsewhere. And that's sort of my interest and focus. Like the fact that we are so far north and so separated geographically from the rest of the province, really. And that has a lot of different ramifications. Yeah, so those are things I'm hoping to alleviate to this position.
I have to ask too, just to kind of out of curiosity, how do you kind of work with the other arts councils in the region? Is it you're sort of, not to put it in a hierarchy, but you're kind of above them and you help kind of make everyone work together? Or is it just sort of another level or another sort of iteration that you can help others who are maybe interacting with those art councils to do things as well?
You know, it's funny, I've been asking myself the same question since I came on board. I was wondering what the purpose of a regional arts council is compared to a local arts council. I wouldn't say I'm above, but because I have connections with everyone, I'm sort of, I feel like I'm well positioned to be a connector and a hub for local arts organizations and other partner organizations. I also think because we're regionally based, we're in a position where we can have regional events and programs that sort of like aggregate the cultural outlook of the region. So one of those things that we already do is the regional exhibition, which is now called Open Sky. Mm-hmm. Yeah, things like that.
Yeah, it's very cool. Well, that was going to be my next question. You've got this artist in residence program. You're, I believe, accepting applications for it right now. Can you tell us a bit about Open Sky and what it is and who you're kind of looking for to be the artist in residence?
Well, so the residency kind of supplements the art exhibition. So I feel like I should start with the art exhibition.
Sure.
So previously it was called the Regional Juried Art Exhibition. We changed it to Open Sky Peace Liard Regional Art Exhibition because we wanted to communicate an openness and opportunity for the artists in the region. And there's no theme to this exhibition, so you can submit any medium exploring any theme that you want. It's open to any artist residing in the Peace region or affiliated with a local arts organization. And yeah, so the residency, you know, it's funny. We're looking for an artist to work in the exhibition space. So they'll have a small pop-up studio, and they will, you know, have this dedicated like 3 weeks to work. They'll be paid $3,000 for this position. They'll also have to interact with visitors, and they'll get, you know, quite a bit of exposure to, you know, from people coming in and learning about their work and stuff like that.
Okay. And I think you said this, I just want to be sure. You kind of, there wasn't a specific medium of artist you're looking for necessarily. It could be painter, sculptor, that sort of thing, eh?
It could. The only consideration is we don't want anything too messy or dusty because it's also an exhibition space. Okay. So no, you know, limitations necessarily on medium, but you needed to keep that in mind. So
Okay, well, that's good to know. When as I said, you're accepting applications now. When do people who are maybe listening now who are like, oh, I'll apply for that? When do they need to have done that by? When's the deadline?
March 31st. And you can find more information on our website, which is peaceliardarts.org, or you can email me at ed@peaceliardarts.org.
Okay, very cool. And we've got just about a minute left, so I also wanted to ask if you can tell us about some other projects you're kind of working on that we might be seeing later in the spring or even in the fall. Is there something you come in and you're like, this is going to be brand new, I'm going to do this? What do you think that is? What's the big one you got coming out that you can tell us about?
Oh, well, nothing is approved yet, so this is all pending approval of the board, but I do want to get the word out. So I mentioned before there are specific barriers to arts in this region, and I want to, have a program that focuses on that. One thing we're looking at building digital capacity for local organizations, because that's become so important since COVID. And I mean, some of the organizations when the pandemic sort of just shut down because they didn't have the skills to new digital technologies that were coming out. And I'm looking at acquiring funding to build websites and host workshops just to, build that digital skill set.
Very cool. Well, Haley, we're really grateful you took a few minutes to chat with us today and bared with us with some of the technical difficulties of the internet in the Peace region. But thank you so much for taking a few minutes to chat with us on Moose Talks today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome. That's Haley Bassett, the Executive Director of the Peace Liard Regional Arts Council.